moving in with the preliminary parts of our presentation. As you can see on your screen, the session is entitled Using Assessment Data to Inform Intervention. And overview of the presentation, it will entail analyzing assessment data, identifying the learning gaps, and addressing the learning gaps in mathematics. So we're going to move into our presentation by first looking at an icebreaker. And in our icebreaker today, it's entitled, What is the Hidden Shape? Now, there will be a covered shape. So on your screen, you're going to be seeing a covered shape. Parts of the shape will be revealed. So we need you to make a guess as to what the hidden shape could be. So you're going to use your understanding of the properties of a shape to determine which shape is being displayed. Now it's one shape, it is hidden. So it's going to be, it's the shape at the back you're looking at, and you will be viewing the shape from different angles. So you want to make a guess, whether a private guess to yourself, or you could indicate in the chat what you think the shape is by looking at its orientation as it is turned in different angles. So this is the first view of the shape. Okay, now, what could this shape possibly be? I want you to make a guess. You could indicate in the chat so everybody could see your guess to see if you're on the right track. You could make a private guess, you know, just in your head by yourself. Okay, I'm seeing a rhombus, septagon. I'm seeing square. I'm seeing pentagon. Nice. Let's take another view. Let's change the orientation of the shape. Let's see. What about from this angle? Would you stick to the first conclusion you came up? Somebody saying rhombus, pentagon, any other? Square. What about this angle? Septagon. Okay. Let us reveal the shape and see what it is really. I see a lot of persons saying pentagon. No. Excellent. So for those persons who guessed pentagon from, say, the first or second slides, very good. Now, the purpose of this exercise is to tell us never to come to a conclusion at a glance. You should use all the facts to make a decision. So moving into our presentation, we're going to be looking at the importance of these facts that we need to use to make a decision in our education system. So I'm going to hand over now to our next speaker, which is Miss Tashana Tennant, and she will be taking us through the first aspect of our session this afternoon. Thank you for participating in the icebreaker.
Good afternoon, principals and teachers. I will be conducting this part of the presentation. As we are all aware, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a slight shift in our education system, more specifically in the way we engage students. As a result, it is important that principals and teachers be efficient enough to engage students as well as bridge the learning gap that may have been experienced or that we may have picked up when analyzing data. It is important to analyze data when deciding which students are in need of greater targeted support, especially in this pandemic where a deeper analysis of students' performance data is essential. It is also important when identifying learning gaps and the specific areas in which a student might need support. For that, it is important for data analysis to be done to implement meaningful programs that can be developed to treat learning gaps. The relevance of data. The first activity captures the relevance of data. Mrs. Young is a grade 4 teacher who has just received reports on her class from the most recent grade 4 mathematics diagnostic assessment. You will be presented with a sample of scores from Mrs. Ying grade 4 diagnostic assessment. After viewing the scores, I want you to answer the question, what can the overall score tell us about the students in Mrs. Ying class? Here's a table with the list of scores from Mrs. Ying's class. We pulled 3 students from the class. We have Maya Brown, who has an overall score of 47, Sean Jones, who has an overall score of 48, and Jason Samuels, who has an overall score of 50. Now, the question to you, principals and teachers, if these scores reflect the general performance of the class, what can you deduce about this class? Now, you have the option of raising your hands, and then we'll unmute your mic for you to give a response, as well as you may reply in the chat. So these are the scores. What can you deduce? What conclusion can you draw from these scores? What intervention plan would you implement just by looking at these 3 students? I know persons might be thinking, okay, these students are performing at the same level, but is this enough for intervention?
So in the chat, we have teachers saying the students are performing below the expected level. Mrs. Foster is saying, what is the total score? Was it marked out of 100%? These are raw scores, Mrs. Foster. Raw scores from the exam. Miss Watson is saying the students are failing. Miss Stacy Taylor disagrees. She says no. Miss Lorna Morgan is saying we need more details to draw a conclusion.
I like those answers, and I see Shanae Cooper Robinson say not enough. They could have gotten high in some scores and low in some, hence average falls. And I like those answers that I'm getting. We're going to go on to the next slide where we are going to get deeper into the information, deeper into the overall scores to assess where these students are really at. So here is the overall score for the students. We break down the scores for the students per strand. We have number, measurement, geometry, algebra, statistics, and probability. We have the total items per strand. So number carries a total of 25, measurement 20, geometry 20, algebra 8, statistics and probability 5. Now, I want you to meticulously scrutinize this table and to tell me whether or not the view that you have from the previous slide, do you still have the same view? Do you still draw the same conclusion as you would have from the previous slide? Okay, so I'm seeing persons saying no, they don't have the same view. Okay, no, I need you to tell me why, what has changed. You may raise your hands and I'll open up your mic. What has changed? Why couldn't we have done the same intervention?
Okay, Miss Allen is saying that we took for granted. I get what the students have. Miss Lorna Morgan is saying we have a lot more work to work with now. Miss Taylor was saying she wasn't saying no before. She was saying no, she needed more information. I stand corrected, Miss Taylor. Miss Keisha Reed Taylor, there is enough data to implement an intervention. Mrs. Barrett, Alicia Barrett is saying no, as you are now better to able to see the areas in which the students need help. So,
okay. So I like those answers. So we saw that Jason got 50, his overall score is 50, and we saw Sean, his overall score is 48, and Maya, her overall score is 47. Looking at the data, how would their intervention vary? So as we observe, we realize that Jason, he got 100% in the number strand. But if you look a little bit closer, you realize that Jason got 5 of 20 in geometry, 2 of 8 in algebra, and 2 of 5 in statistics. While on the other hand, Maya is getting 15 of 25 in number, 12 of 22 in measurement, 12 of 20 in geometry, 5 of 8 in algebra, and 3 of 5. How would their intervention vary? What would you do? What targeted plan would you put in for these students?
Ms. Millicent Watson is saying we look at the strands and do targeted intervention.
And that's very good, because if a child is advancing in one strand, but is weak in the other strand, while it's vice versa for the other student, it means then that the intervention may vary. It means then that Sean is advancing in algebra. Jason his grade is very low in algebra. It means that Jason needs some kind of intervention where it lies with algebra. However, Sean, no, his intervention is mainly in statistics and probability, as well as in geometry. So we cannot just look on the overall score and say, okay, this child got an 80, this child got a 50. This child that gets a 50 needs more intervention than the child that gets an 80. No, sometimes the overall score do not align with the raw score. It can mean that the child gets a high score, but this child is failing in three strands, but got some very, very high scores in the other 2 strands. So we must get deeper into the data before we implement any type of program for these students. I see Keisha Reed Taylor saying, as teachers, we would have to do differentiation of instruction. Assist, and Alien is saying assist the students individually. So we would have to assist the students individually based on the support that individual student need.
Ms. Taylor is also saying that an item analysis could be done to get more information as well.
Good. So we can all agree that it is not just to look on the overall data to say, okay, this is where my student is at. But we need to now see that the overall score is not enough. The overall score is not enough to implement any targeted intervention plan. The overall score needs to be further analyzed before any form of intervention, any form of decision making can be done. While the overall score is relevant when we're looking at large groups of data such as nationally, regionally, school-wide, or grade, we need to work with smaller sets of data when we're talking about school class-wise and about individual students. So let me repeat, while the overall score is relevant when looking at larger groups, that is regionally, nationally, school-wide, and grade. It is important that we analyze a smaller set of data, for example, class and individual. We need to analyze beyond the overall score to get a feel that, okay, this is the specific support that this child needs. Thank you. I will now hand over to Mrs. Eugenie Cross.
Good afternoon, principals, teachers, colleagues, and if there are any education officers amongst us. I want to thank you all for joining us today in this virtual setting. So as you were told, I am Eugenie Smith-Cross, and I will be taking you through part 2 of this presentation. As we continue to break down the topic of how we can use assessment data to inform intervention, I want to take us a step further to establishing a bit of a rationale behind what we are doing. Mr. Edgell would have alluded earlier to the fact that the Student Assessment Unit of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information would generally assess how our students perform from time to time. And as we look forward to returning to school in the next 2 weeks, with all that has been happening with the COVID, it is very imperative that time be spent to establish where our students are, to find out where the learning gaps are, so that we can target the weak areas. So you can expect to see from the Student Assessment Unit a diagnostic test, and this is for all from grades 2 to grades 6 of the primary grade, and from grade 7 to grade 10 of the secondary grades. So in setting this assessment, there's a focus on the level of students' understanding. Now, what do we mean when we talk about the level of students' understanding? We want to know, take you into how the instrument is developed and the reasoning and the thought process that goes into selecting the options that the children will be responding to. Using this form of assessment will give us a clearer idea of some of the possible reasons for the errors that students make when they try to answer their questions. So what is happening is that these questions that would have been developed, and we know that the Student Assessment Unit generally uses the multiple choice type questions, because you know that is kind of easier in terms of gathering and analyzing your data. They would have looked at all the 4 options for the multiple choice, and they would have put the responses according to how they think the students' level of understanding would progress. So there are 4 levels to how students understand and to the thought process that they bring into solving a problem. And today we want to look at these levels. Starting at level 1, a response that would be set at level 1 would indicate that there are significant gaps in the content. In fact, these students oftentimes totally are clueless about the content and about what is expected of them. Their conceptual understanding is just not there. So just limited and vague understanding of what is expected of them is brought in this area. Now, I think I see the chat lighting up. So if there is a response that someone would like to share, I ask the person monitoring the chat to just indicate, and I will give you that chance. Or if somebody has raised their hand, just indicate and I will allow the person to speak.
Okay, not as yet, Mrs. Cross, not as yet.
All right, thank you. So as we move on to the level 2, as we look at the responses, level 2 deals with now basic minimal knowledge of the content. The child can somewhat identify the relevant topic or idea, or the content, but the concept, but what they are not able to apply because their understanding really is not fully developed as it relates to this particular content or concept. And I hope everybody is following me now. Let us move to level 2. At this level, when we see a response, the student responding at this level, what is happening here is that they have a general idea of the content or the concept, but they are not able to really make the application if they are given a scenario outside of a regular setting. So you will find that a child at this level really can do well with the recall questions, the questions that are at DOK level 1. But when they get to applying, making application, using real world situations or other scenarios, there is a gap there and they are unable to take their understanding a step further. The student who responds at level 4 is that student that we want to see, because this is where the correct response comes. You see now that this child is able to apply the knowledge of the content or the concept in the required manner that is set by the item. So I am going to take you a little further to give you clear understanding as I talk about the student responses, and I'm going to use an example of a question from a grade 6 diagnostic test. Okay, so here is your item, and we are using this item set at DOK level 1. And the question in terms of the objective, the students are supposed to be able to read, write, and use numbers using the principle of place value in the Hindu-Arabic system of numeration. Here is the question. The question is asking, what is this particular number written in words? So let us see the levels of thinking that, or the level of understanding that will be revealed in the responses. Now, here we have the question again, and we just want to allow you to see the options that are here. And for this particular activity, I would like for some persons to just take some time, look at the levels again, and process this in your mind and see if you can figure out which option is at what level. So we are going to try to align based on the responses of the students, the level at which their understanding, we see their understanding coming out if they were to respond to option A, B, C, or D. Now, as you go forward, let me remind you that option 1 is where the students are clueless. So you see that they will be making a guess. They're trying to say something, they're trying to do something, but really and truly, it's a guess. They are not sure. They have not much idea about what to do. And level 2 is where they have a little bit of knowledge about the content and they can somewhat identify relevant topic or the idea or the concept, but they still cannot apply it because of the flawed understanding that they would be bringing to the item. At level 3, we see that they have a general idea, but they are unable to make the application in the required situation or scenario. And then level 4 would be the correct response. So is there anybody who's able to say which of these options could be at a level 1, a level 2, level 3, or a level 4? And it is easy to start at the correct response. So I'm pretty sure that by now persons would have identified where the correct response is. But I'm seeing Keisha Retail has raised her hand. So will someone allow her to speak?
Yes, Mrs. Retailer, go ahead and open your mic.
All right, good afternoon, colleagues.
Good afternoon.
All right, based on the responses, I think level 1, a child would be at A.
Okay.
And for level 2, at D.
All right.
At level 3, the child would be at C. And for a level 4, the child would have been at B.
All right, just a quick question before you close back your mic. Can you give me just a reason why you would put D at level 2 and C at level 3? Just talk us through it, yes.
Yes. All right, for my choice is that the student is not aware of the millions. At least for C, the child realized that it is in the million.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
But for D, the child is unaware, right, that they have a place value of 1 million.
Thank you so much. Right.
Coming from Mrs. Cross.
Coming from the chat, Mrs. Cross.
Yes.
We have a few other persons who had those options while our teacher here, or principal, I'm not sure, was responding. So we have Miss Andrea Allen. She had that response as well. And going down in the chat, we have Miss Wendy Bent, also with those responses for levels 2 and 3.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you for responding, ladies and gentlemen. So let us look and see if my response is in sync with your response. That will tell me or tell us all that we are on the same page here. All right, awesome. So thank you so much, because now this table is revealing really that all the responses that were made were basically correct. So we see here that for level 1, where the child would have chosen the option A, the student would be showing that he or she has very little understanding of the principle of place value and is confusing the little he knows with the principle of face value. So you can see the letters, he knows them, but he's not able to read because the principle of place value is really not cemented in his mind, in his brain, in his thinking as yet. At level 2, just as Mrs. Taylor had said before, the student has very little understanding of the principle of place value, and as such is struggling to read the number. But the difference now with the level 3 is that we see that the student knows that the number is in the millions, but that child is really unable to read it accurately. So, you know, just a little intervention and that child should be good to go if we continue to be persistent in how we assist this child. And then, of course, the child with the B, the option at B would have been that child who would have responded at level 4 with the correct answer. Thank you so much for participating. So the question we want to ask ourselves today is, what can the data tell us? And we know that data can tell us quite a number of things. So we want to take you through the process using an activity. And in this activity, the scenario is given of a cluster of principals and senior staff members who have met to discuss the approach they would take in addressing the learning gaps that have taken place within their schools in light of what has occurred due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, a sample of the assessment summary is given, and each attendant was presented with this sample from the Diagnostic Assessment Summary Report. The report gives a breakdown of the strands as well as the students' level of understanding. So as we look at this sample, and we are going to be moving to the sample, we want you now to just think about how you would be able to summarize the student's performance looking at the sample that would have been taken from the Diagnostic Assessment Summary Report. Here is the sample. Okay, so we see right here what we have before us would be 3 grades taken out of the Diagnostic Assessment Summary Report, grades 3, 4, and 5. And I hope you are seeing the strands that are on the slide: number, measurement, geometry, algebra, statistics, and probability would be there. Now the L1, L2, L3, and L4 would be the level of students' understanding, and the percentage scores are given. Now let me explain to you a little of about how we arrive at this percentage. Now, for example, if we were to look in the geometry strand at level 1, students, we see 30% of this of responses at level 1. So for example, now we know that when the assessment papers are set, it is not just one question on the geometry. So my example today is, let's say on that paper, there are 5 questions under geometry. And stay with me, remember we are at level 1 under geometry. And that is at grade 3. So sorry about that. Grade 3, geometry, and level 1. Okay, so let me hope your eyes are there with me now. So if there are 5 geometry questions and 20 students sit this paper, we would get the total number of responses by multiplying the 20 by the 5 geometry questions. So in all, we would have 100 responses. Okay, so I hope you are with me. The total number of responses would be 100. This 30% for grade 3 at level 1 is indicating that of the 100 responses, 30% is at level 1. Now, looking at this data, this is a great cause for concern because we know based on the explanation early on that the students who are actually understanding at level 1 and level 2 would be the weakest students. We don't want the greater percentage of our data to be at level 1 or at level 2. So for example, what would poor data look like? Let us go to grade 3 under number strand. Look at the number strand at level 1. You are seeing 53% of the responses at level 1. This is a cause for great concern with this strand and with this grade, this number of students. Now, what would we want to see? What does good data look like then? Let me give you an example again. Look at measurement at grade 5. There are 50% of the response at level 4. Now, even though we want more than this, but this is not bad, and especially because we see the smallest percentage at level 1 for grade 5 measurement being 8 there. And then we see another 22% of the responses at level 3 for grade 5 under measurement. And we know that those students are not far. They have general understanding of the content. They just need some understanding of how to apply. So when we develop our intervention plans, we would know how to target that cohort. And then we look at level 2, where we see 20% of the responses there, and we know that we have our work to do for those students. Looking at statistics and probability as well, we are also seeing that for the grade 5 students, 45% of the responses would be at level 4, 35% of the responses would be at level 3. And even though we want most of it to be at level, most of the percentage we want of the responses, we want to be at level 4, we are still not far. If this percentage is at level 3, we can work with the students. 20% of the responses would be at level 1 and level 2 combined. So we are seeing that it's less in comparison to level 3 and level 4. So we could work to improve that for grade 5 students under statistics and probability. So now that you have an understanding, I hope, of how to interpret this data, what to look for, where the higher percentage should be, and if the higher percentage is at a specific place, there's a cause for concern. We are going to be launching a poll, and let's see how you will respond. I invite you to take the poll at this time. Okay. I am not seeing any responses to the poll as yet. So you have which grade is showing a need for the most urgent attention. All right. Okay, I see a response. One person has responded. And for number 2, which strand show the lowest performance across all grades. All right. The responses are coming in. Miss Dyer?
Yes, Miss Bent wants to see the data again before she makes her decision. Please show the data.
Would I be able to go back there?
Yes, let's go back one slide.
Okay. Yes. I think the poll is now covering
6 of 185.
You can always pull the poll out of the way. So
okay. All right, good. So, Ms. Dyer, you will
6
give me the
so
response from the poll. Yes.
Yes, I will.
Yes. Okay, how are the responses going?
We're going on. Give us a few more seconds.
Sure, not a problem. Okay.
All right, I'm going to ask for us to round off the poll time at 3 minutes. So it's at 2 minutes and 30 seconds now. So just 30 more seconds and then we'll close the poll and see what the responses are.
Thank you.
We have a few persons also responding in the chat with the with their data to say that most persons are saying grade 3 for number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, yes, basically they're responding to the first question, grade 3.
Okay.
So
right.
We have, okay,
yes.
So now we're showing the results.
Yes.
So we have 72% of the persons responding in the poll indicated that grade 3 is in need of the most urgent attention. 22% grade 4, 6% grade 5. For question 2, which strand showed the lowest performance across all the grades, we have 56% of persons saying the number strand showed the lowest performance. We have 14% saying measurement, 8% saying algebra, 11% saying statistics. So let us look back at the data set and see.
For question 3, what do you believe should be done to address the issues identified?
So 83% says reteach.
83% says
nobody
reteach.
says ignore, move on. 3% is undecided and 14% said something other than the options given.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And thank all the respondents. So we are going to now go through and see how much we agree with what you have said, or how much we disagree with some of what you may have said. All right, so let us look at how we would have interpreted this data. And you would have pointed out already some of the things that this data would have shown us. So the first thing that we would have noticed looking at the data is that for all the classes, we have critical issues here. There is a great cause for concern. Just to revisit the data, look at it, you can see right across the board for all the strands and for the 3 grades represented here that there is a high percentage of the responses at level 1 and level 2. This means that there is serious problem in mathematics at this school. where we would have received this data, and we need now to be very targeted in getting an intervention program, and this is a matter of urgency. So right across, there is weakness. Let us look at another area, and most of the persons, 72%, would agree that the number strand was the most problematic strand overall. Let's look back at it. Look at the number strand. Look at grade 4. Grade 4 has a 64% response at level 2. And you combine that with a 9% response at level 1, that is a total of 73% of your students performing at the responding at the level 1 and the level 2 options. Now, this is really serious. Look at grade 3, 53% of the responses at level 1 and 34% of the responses at level 2. Look at grade 5. So the same thing under number, we are seeing that there are really critical gaps in the understanding, the level of students' understanding as it relates to this strand in all 3 grades. What else did we find out?
So in the chat, we have Miss Ben saying, yes, that is right. We need to do something about this grade. Miss Susan Henry saying grade 3 needs improvement in all areas. Miss Wendy Bent is saying grade 3 class is in need of help. And Alan is saying revisiting the data right across the board. Right, so our teachers, our participants here are agreeing with what needs to be done. Miss Alisa Barrett is saying better intervention is needed for grade 3. So everybody is agreeing that something needs to be done at grade 3.
I am back, Miss Dyer. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Are you still able to see my screen?
Not as yet.
Or do I need to reshare?
Reshare.
Are you still able to, or do I need to reshare?
You need to reshare.
Okay.
Let me continue with the chat. Miss Andrea Brown is saying intervention program needed in the school, especially at grade 3. And yes. Miss Charmaine Wallace is saying teacher needs help at grade 3. Miss Hunter, Yvette Hunter, is saying the number strand is poorly taught.
Okay.
So your screen is back up.
Thank you.
You're
so
welcome.
There's so much that we can really pick up from this data. And here is another thing. We would have seen that the strand showing the greatest strength here is statistics and probability. And looking at the data, we are still not comfortable with statistics and probability totally, but we can see that there is a greater percentage than the other strands at level 2 of the responses at level 3 and level 4, especially for grade 5, where we see 45% of the responses at level 4 and 35% of the responses at level 3. So we have work to do, but it is not as severe as with the other grades. Let us see if there's anything else that the data tells us. So the data also tells us that grade 3 needs the most critical attention, and everybody would have agreed with that because we saw it right there in front of us. Now, having gone through this data, the next question we need to ask ourselves, what do we do with the data? what we need to bear in mind, or we have this data, and as somebody said in the chat that it could be poor teaching. We are not certain that this is poor teaching, or it could be some other reasons, but we can only speculate. So for us to get to the meat of the matter, to get to the bottom of what is happening, we now have to break down the data further to reflect an analysis of the class according to the strand. And for each strand, we can further break them down to reveal the most problematic topics. And looking at this, we would have seen that grade 3, as we mentioned before, would have been the most problematic grades. So we want to take a closer look now at grade 3. And Andrea Brown has raised the hand. Can someone allow her to speak, please?
Go ahead and unmute.
Good afternoon, colleagues.
Good afternoon.
All right, in looking at the intervention for grade 3, my thought on this is that we would first have to look at how the math or number specialists taught in grade 2, because it would mean that the students are not possessing the basic content that they would need then to start grade 3. So we can't just focus on saying we're going to do an intervention at grade 3. I think we also need to look at where the children are coming from. So grade 2 would have to be a part of that as well.
Okay, thank you for your contribution. All right, so we are seeing that, as we said before, that the 3 most problematic strands within grade 3 as well as the other grades would be number, algebra, and measurement.
So in the chat, Ms. Cross, a lot of persons are agreeing. I'm assuming they're agreeing with the speaker a while ago. Yes. They're saying true prerequisite. And I also agree to some extent. The data shown was grades 3, 4, and 5. So it just might be a possibility, Miss, that grade 2 was showing the same problem, and maybe the problem was coming from down there. So that is something that we would have to factor in the intervention. So I do agree that that would have to be taken into consideration as an intervention. So persons are saying the teaching strategies need to be revisited. And Ms. Charmaine Wallace is saying, I think from grade 1 or at the infant department, there needs to be some intervention.
Okay, okay. And that could be quite possibly so, because there are varying reasons as to why this data is as problematic as it is. Now, remember, we are looking now at the meeting by the principals, and I saw quite a number of persons suggesting from the poll that we reteach, and this is what they are saying also at this meeting. So after noting the areas of concern, a percentage of the senior staff want to reteach all the topics from term 3 of the previous grade. We also see another group thinking that we should just move on with the topics from the current grade. So what is happening in this room right now? There is a divide. The room is divided. What do we do? Which approach is better? We don't know. Some people think it's to reteach. Some people think that we should move on. And I noticed that persons from the poll agree with reteaching. But let us see, is there another solution? Persons mentioned other. So persons might think there are other solutions on this. Now, you can go ahead also and put your responses in the chat. And I see Miss Yvette Hunter has raised the hand. So I would like somebody to allow her, help her to get the chance to open her mic and speak. Ms. Hunter.
Okay, while that is being done, let me give you some idea of what is going on in the chat. So Williams here is saying, try integrating some of these topics. Miss Peter Gay Fletcher is also saying integrating is possible. Miss Butler is saying reteach using different strategies. Another teacher, Miss Morgan, Lorna, is saying reteach the weak areas. So we have a lot of persons responding reteaching. Miss Barrett is saying you can't move on. We have to reteach using different strategies. So just like in the poll, we have a lot of persons strongly in the reteaching of the concepts. So is Miss ready to speak now?
I think she lowered her hand.
She did? Okay. Okay, persons are saying stream students. All right, I allow her to speak now.
You can go ahead and unmute Ms. Hunter.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm thinking of reteaching, yes, but we'll first have to have a deeper analysis, not just jump to the conclusion of reteaching. We'll have to do an analysis of the item and each student's work to see what part of it they fell down on in this score, because I can get my answer incorrect, another person get their incorrect, and it's two different. I can get the process, another person can get the actual calculating the answer. So we first have to do a deeper understanding of what went on in each child's work before we can decide to reteach, because reteaching will frustrate other students who fully understand the concept. And what if you only a part of it you don't understand? Would you want to reteach everything? And we know how students are. Once they understand a certain concept, they don't want to hear it again. So that's why I'm saying I wouldn't just jump to reteach like that without doing further or deeper analysis of what took place. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I fell off line again.
All right, I can respond to her. Very good. I think her thoughts are along the correct path. Deeper analysis has to be done, and it is necessary in order to treat with the needs of our students. So based on what she responded, I agree. Some deeper analysis should be done.
Okay, thank you. And we all agree, and that is where we are going next. That is really, so we are going to be going into the breakout room, and we are going to be looking at grade 3 and the focus strands, the strands that we would have found to be most problematic: number, measurement, algebra. I just want to give you a little rundown before we go into the breakout of what is going to be happening in the breakout room. So what would have happened now is that we would have spotted the strands, and we are moving from the strands to the topic. So we have identified those strands that are most problematic, and now we are going to try to identify the topics in which the students are experiencing the great
All right, I'll just pick up where Mrs. Cross left off. Now that we have identified the strands that are problematic, in the breakout room, we're going to identify the topics in which the students are experiencing the greatest challenges. And this can be ascertained by doing an item analysis that was suggested earlier. A few teachers earlier alluded to item analysis, which was very good. So that will be a part of our breakout room activity. So we're going to be looking at what it is exactly targeted where the students fell down in our breakout room. We're going to be taking those topics and breaking them down now into which objective would address these topics from the grade 3 level and move on into what is needed now for grade 4. Remember, our focus is on that grade 3 class, and we identify 3 major strands: number, measurement, and algebra. So going into the breakout room, we'll have one room dealing with a particular strand where we will take a deeper look at the topics that were identified during the item analysis, the objectives that were covered to deal with those topics, and how it is that we can address the needs of the students by coming up with an intervention. So Mr. Edgil, I think you can move us over to the breakout room
All
now.
right, great. Thank you, Ms. Dara. Just a quick note for all participants. In the breakout room, you will have the free will to open your mics. You don't need to raise the hands there. It's only in the main session you have to raise your hand to get your mics unmuted. Also for breakout room 1, because Mrs. Cross sort of fell off for a while, Ms. Nikisha Bailey will be engaging you until Mrs. Cross has returned. Going across now. Okay, good afternoon again, colleagues. As Ms. Dyer prepares to share her screen to continue with the remainder of the presentation, I just want to really talk quickly to the fact that technology in the way it is now is new to us. And it is very important that we really make the effort to understand the technology. I would have noted that there are some persons who would have fell off occasionally, and this is understandable. And these are just one of the things that we must expect as our reality. And as we expect these things as our reality, we start to work out in our own little space, how do we troubleshoot the issues and then come up with our own contingencies to treat with the possible things that could go wrong with the use of the modality. All right. I'm just saying that, and I see it as a learning experience for all of us. So let us bear this in mind as we go forward. I hand over now to Ms. Dyer to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Edgehill. Welcome everybody back to the main room. I hope we gain some insight on how to merge objectives and see it as a way to move forward in our teaching learning environment as we work with our colleagues in the breakout rooms. I'm just going to ask you to participate in the chat. You can give us a short feedback as to how you felt about working with the objectives as we move through the presentations, and I'll just give somebody else, Ms. Tennant, maybe a chance to give me a feedback of what is going on in the chat. So based on everything that we have done so far, we looked at interpreting data, and we looked at how it is that we can use different things like item analysis to identify the weak strands, and persons were talking about an item analysis even from the beginning. So it seems as if it's nothing new to some of us or to any of us really. So not only looking at the overall score, but looking at a breakdown and to see what the topics are, subtopics, moving on to objectives. Also,
Ms. Dyer.
Yes.
To move on, Alicia Ashley Barrett is saying, I think it's a good idea to merge the objectives.
Very good. Very good. Positive feedback. I like that. So we also looked at capturing the objectives that were not mastered based on the subtopics. So in the results, we saw where students didn't master things. They were responding at a level 2 or level 1. How do we capture this data and use it to help our students? We also looked at merging previous term's objective with that of the current grade. And that's what we did in our breakout room. And I hope everybody achieved this part of the session, because this is something that we can take away and move with in our various schools. Now, teaching to facilitate prior knowledge needs and to cover current grade objectives has to do with merging. So once we merge, we'll be addressing what the students didn't get and what they now need to get. So,
Ms. Dyer,
yes, go ahead.
The chat is blowing up. Alan says, very good idea to merge objective.
Nice.
And item analysis is not new. We have the system at our school, Caroline Hill, usually done in multigrade.
Very good. Thank you very much, everyone. It's nothing new to some of us, and to some of us it may be new. It may be something that we know about, but we found it difficult to do. There are several factors, but right now with what we're going through, we see where a little additional work is necessary if we want to move forward. So when we examine prior knowledge needs for grade 4, we need to look at the strands to be addressed. So we need to look at, for example, what we did a while ago, prior learning needs for grade 4. We need to look at merging the objectives. We need to look at developing a scope and sequence. Now, in developing our scope and sequence, there are several things that we need to bear in mind. We need to bear in mind the things that are needed right now. Which objectives can I attack right now for term 1 at grade 4, for the example that we just went through? Not all the objectives that the students failed are needed right now. But for those that are needed right now, we prioritize those objectives according to the immediate needs of the students. For those that are not needed, we leave them for later. So some objectives will not require immediate attention and can be addressed with the relevant topic at a later date. So we need to scope and sequence our objectives that were weak, looking at the time factors. When is it needed? Time factor also as in how long should I spend on it now that I see how much work needs to be put in place. And we also need to look at modality. How am I going to bring this information across?
Before you continue.
Yes, go ahead.
Donna Brooks-Bin is saying we need to collect the data, analyze the data by drilling down into it, employing intervention methods, especially merging the objectives. Paul Baker is saying, also agree that objective merging is a good idea. It also helps to cover the ground necessarily while catering to specific needs. And Tracy Ann is saying, thank you for the information on merging objectives. Wonderful stuff.
Very good. I'm so thankful for these positive responses, teachers and principals. We know we are struggling and we are trying to find a solution that will aid all of us. So in developing the scope and sequence should not only merge the topics, but also sequence the objectives. So that's where we speak at right now objectives and later objectives. So put it in sequence as the need arise, so as to address the prior knowledge needs and to move forward. So we're going to move into an activity now that's just going to wrap up everything that we looked at from the very beginning of this session right up to the breakout room. So this activity reads, the principal at Shore Score Primary has called a staff meeting to discuss the results of her essay unit diagnostic test. Now, she informs the staff that their overall average on the test was 70%. And as a result, they are considered one of the better performing schools in the region in mathematics. So this is her analysis. Now, Mr. Rowe, who is a teacher at this school, is very concerned because after he did his analysis and he reviewed his class result, he noticed that the students performed poorly in algebra and statistics. So what are some of the things now that Mr. Rowe can do to address this concern in order to move forward? So based on everything that we did in this session, you can post in the chat what are some of the things now that were highlighted to you that Mr. Rowe can do to address his class.
Miss Dyer, before you move on.
No problem.
Miss Maria Blair is saying, how will this diagnostic test be administered when many of our students are not online? I am sure I heard yesterday's meeting that the diagnostic test will be done online. Some information on that. Wonderful job, math professional. And Joanne, love the idea of merging the objective. Very useful in the multi-grade classroom. You may continue.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Edgel to address the...
All right, and I will speak to that at the end of the presentation, all right?
Okay, thank you, sir. Yeah. So what are some of the things that Mr. Rowe can do? We know that Mr. Rowe can do is item analysis. Persons are used to that. We know that Mr. Rowe can look further at the breakdown of where it is in which strand the students went wrong. What topics did they fall weak in? Then from that, he can pick up objectives from his curriculum or scope and sequence that can help his students now to move on and merge these topics so he can move on with his teaching. So those are the steps that Mr. Rowe can take in order to address his class needs. So in bridging the gaps and how we treat with teaching going forward, we need to analyze assessment summaries. We need to break down the school information that we get. Now, documents that we get are unique to each school. So my method, my scope and sequence, my data analysis will be different from yours. Even if we're within the same school, We both have grade 4 classes. We're dealing with a different set of students. So we need to do our own analysis, do our own deeper analysis, and have our sound decisions on how to proceed with our lesson. In bridging the gaps, we also need to look at each individual school. These will need their own item analysis. So I can't take from my teacher friend down the road, she doing this, or I'm going to do it too. No, it is unique to each person. You have to create your own scope and sequence. Your need is not what my needs are. Create your curriculum that will take into consideration the modality, how you're going to deliver the information, the time you need to spend on each objective, and based on the student's performance, how many need real intervention and how many only need a little pep up here to get on the way. So in treating with bridging the gaps in the curriculum, let us go through the steps again. We analyze data from the diagnostic test, and we encourage you to also do your diagnostic test and bear these things in mind when you do them. We identify weak performance in each strand. So we cannot look at overall in mathematics. We need to break it down because there are different aspects. Break down these strands into subtopics and then select objectives of concern. Where is the concern? Identify the objectives needed for prior knowledge, and then we develop our scope and sequence with the needs of the current grade in mind. And after we develop the scope and sequence, we merge objectives and we are ready to go ahead and teach. So I hope we have achieved something from our activity. I hope these steps will be resonated with everyone. All we need to do in order to move forward as a guide, as a help to assist us in addressing the needs of our students. So we have some additional support. These links will be pasted in the chat. And these are some additional support that we found that is a bit helpful for mathematics. So the first is an article about bridging the gaps. It also speaks to the use of the tablet, in helping the students to bridge gaps in mathematics. The second is a mathematics game that I found that is really helpful. It deals with grades 1 straight up and different topics in mathematics. Students can play the game based on the topic. They get a written report at the end of the game to say if they mastered the topic. So I think this would be helpful as a reinforcement for our students. So these will be shared with you in the chat, something you can look at and see if it is helpful for you. As I said, it's not one size fits all. Now, I'm going to say thanks on behalf of everybody, all the presenters. Before you close off. Yes, sure.
Alicia, Ashley, let me go up. All right, is asking, when will the SAU provide these diagnostic tests? Janet Shaw, CIT teams are critical in achieving this. This session is just so relevant. Karen Smith, could we get a copy of the recording?
Okay, I think Mr. Edgel addressed the time for the diagnostic test earlier in the chat, but he's going to speak to that. Once I wrap up, he's going to take over and address these issues. So he will share with you when and where and how and why based on the diagnostic assessment. So thank you for participating. We value your feedback as the slide suggests. So if you have a QR code reader on your phone, you can just use this QR code and go to our Google evaluation form. If not, you can access it through this link. The link will be pasted in the chat as well. To complete an evaluation form, just give us a feedback as to how relevant the information was, how you found the presentation, was it helpful to you, etc. It will only take a few seconds to complete. I'm going to hand over now to Mr. Edgehill. I feel so very good to be with you here this afternoon, principals, teachers, other members of staff. I enjoyed this session. I know you did as well. Mr. Edgehill, as soon as you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Dyer. Please keep the screen up so that the participants can scan the code for those who have the scanner, and I await Ms. Tennant's input of all the necessary links in the chat.
I will.
Great. So I want to really take this time to thank the team, Mrs. Eugenie Smith-Cross, Ms. Keisha Dyer, and Ms. Tashana Tennant. I believe they did an exceptional job in breaking down the information and sharing with our stakeholders today. I believe what was shared today is very important, pertinent, and timely based on the fact that we have the assessment coming up. We want to ensure that we provide the support and guidance needed so that you'll be able to really look at the data set and use the information to formulate your structured scope and sequence to treat with your students based on the needs you have in your school. Right? So